Okay, welcome to part 2 of the cat video. As you can see, we did part 1, was just creating that eye. I'm decided with the indentation method of transferring the line drawing, I'm going to do a separate real-time video for you. I'll create that in the next couple of days and post that up for you as a hints and tips video. And I'll include also doing a way of transferring it over using your transfer paper, a more traditional way of transferring a line drawing over. But obviously I used a stylus over my line drawing and impressed the dark lines I wanted through onto my surface, because there's enough give in this surface to leave an impression. Some papers you don't get that. So first of all, anyway, going on to the creation of the fur, this next hour of video is approximately 3 hours or so of drawing that I've compressed down into some real time and some 2 times and 4 times video. So I'm starting off going in, because of the blues that are in the coat I'm using, it's the Helio Blue Reddish, again all Polychromos that I'm using, just to start mapping in some of the real focal blue points of this cat, the face, around the nose, the eye, the fur. The areas that are black in the final photo are actually pretty much left black, but the whole way of working on the black surface, I did mention it with the eye video, is that you can start with your mid colours and go up to your lights, and then you can go back in, and anything that you've gone over into the black areas, you can just use your black pencil to take that back out again. A bit like using an eraser, but you're using the black pencil to neutralise any colour or any highlights that have gone into the area that you didn't mean it to, if that makes sense. It will later on. I've slowed down the video in a couple of places just to demonstrate that. So I'm flicking between, I'm using also Venetian red, I'm using another blue as well, I'm using the Indanthrine blue, but mainly I'm using that Helio Blue Reddish just to map out, just to get me going really. So I've got some of the shapes there, so just mapping out the ear, I've mapped down over the nose, and this literally is just going to be, this first hour is going to be, we'll end up with the ears and top of the nose, down over the cheek. Most of that will be in place, and then we'll flick to doing the fur in the background, so over the cat's back, down around his haunches, and then we'll sweep back around in the final video, and we'll complete the face later on as well. So literally just mapping in, just so I'm getting a bit of a cat shape down. I've got sharp pencils for this, so unlike when we use the watercolour pencils, I've got quite a sharp pencil. As you can see, not too much pressure, because again the grip of this paper, even though it says it's smooth, it has a really nice grip to it. So literally just touching that, you can see, I mean, my light does reflect quite a lot on the black paper. So it is, if you imagine this paper to be black, the blue is showing up beautifully without using much pressure. You see I'm holding my pencil a third to halfway up, so you can see there's not much pressure going down there at all, but it's leaving a lovely amount of pigment on the actual paper. So all I'm doing is flicking my eyes back to that reference photo, and the areas where I can see the blue, I'm just mapping those blue shades in. It's just looking for the shapes, the placement of colour. Okay, I'm switching over now to my Venetian red. Also in the reds I'll use my Caput Mortem Violet for the darker areas, and we'll go up, the lightest will be the light flesh, and I also use a burnt carmine in there as well. You can see that's the two there. I've got the burnt carmine and I've got the Venetian red. So very pinky, reddish, warm colours. And to be honest, the Helio Blue Reddish, obviously it's in the title, it's reddish, it's got that reddish undertone to that blue. And we use a mauve or mauve as well, which is the purple. And then we'll use mainly warm greys. I won't even use a cool grey. I'll use my white as my cool later on in the flesh. So literally I've just used the Venetian red just to outline the shape of the top of the ears, I'm just laying down, again, picking out the colours, just looking at my reference photo and popping in the little shapes, little dots of colour where I can see it on the reference. I'm going to run this through another editor actually, and then see if I can just up the contrast a little bit as well, so it just makes this pop a little bit more for you. So I'm just thinking about things here. I'm just looking, I'm just marking in a few other areas of the cat. It's just, sometimes it just helps make sure I've got all my proportions right there. But again, like I say, I'll show you how to do that tracing transfer using the stylus to impress. You'll see later on, we'll do I'll use a light flesh down from the ear down over, above that, the eye. And you'll see then when I lay the nib flat against the paper, it's a bit like if you were using the stylus to impress onto white paper to preserve, say, the white whisker area, and then if you rub over it with the side of your pencil, those lines will stay white. This is going to work exactly the same way, but the lines will stay black. So we'll rub over it with our highlight. The lines will stay black, and it's almost like working in negative. But we're still popping in our mid colours and then our lights. Our darks are already in place. So normally where I'd say put in your darks first, our darks are already in place because we are using that lovely dark Colourfix spectrum, you know, in the black shade. So here I've brought in the sky blue. Just again marking in where those tiny little highlights are. I'm going to make sure I've got the reference photo popped up to one side for you as well on the video, so you can see what it is I'm following. Again, I do recommend that if you can get your reference image onto a tablet that you can zoom into. I use Microsoft Surface tablet just for my reference image to draw from. I also have a printout sat above or to one side of my drawing board of my reference whenever I'm drawing, because it's good just to refer. Even though you've got it on your screen, you can zoom in and out of the detail. It is good to have a printout or a copy there of it full size to what you're actually drawing as well. So that's just something. Maybe I'll take a photo as well of my work area so you can see exactly how it is that I work. So you see I was quite loose to start with when I was putting in that blue and just mapping in those initial colours just to give me a basic shape to follow. Now I'm just taking it a little bit steadier, going in with that light, that sky blue, just popping in some of the highlights. And what we'll do is we will work layers. So where I'm popping in these colours and these lights, we'll probably go over these and knock them back with darker colours. And then we'll layer and bring them back up again so they're nice and smooth, because at the moment, where it's a bit like with a pastel mat, where this pencil is going down, like I said, even though it's called Colourfix Smooth, the actual texture of the paper as the pencil goes on is really rough. So if I zoomed in on this now, it would be looking really grainy. So it is a case of building layers. We can't build anywhere near as much layers as we do with the pastel mat, but we can get, I don't know, 5 or 6 layers onto this Colourfix paper. And also again as well, remember we can use the knife on this, and I do use the knife just at the end. So same with the pastel mat, just think about what your surface colour is. So obviously with this it's black, so with the knife we can go back in right at the end and any little tiny shapes or texture that, or fur lines that we want to bring back. With black lines we can use the knife to do that right at the end. So here again, where I've just I'm using my lights, so I'm using the sky blue and the light flesh are my lights, just to highlight. Like, so I'm just feeling my way. I do this with my drawings to start with. I feel my way around, just getting my outlines in place, just building it up, bringing some depth. So my darks are already in place because of the colour of the paper, so I'm just getting in my nice bright highlights now by using my light colours. I think it just helps with the mind when you're creating as well. If you feel like you're not getting anywhere because you're working on, say, an inch square at a time and you don't really see much developing, this way you're sort of working all over to bring the whole composition and image together all in one go. It just helps me to see my end image coming to life in front of me, how I envisage it, faster than, say, if I did work on one small area at once. It's just the way I work. Some people prefer to work tiny areas at a time. Personally, I prefer to work in a more painterly method and work on a bigger area, pulling it all together. Obviously, if I'd some of the colours I'm using, obviously if I'd have done this on pastel mat, say on the anthracite, and if I was going to put in a watercolour pencil base layer, I'd be working much looser. Here at the moment I'm going in, I'm being quite detailed and quite precise with my placement. That's because with the pastel mat you've got a lot more chances to correct anything. So you can be quite loose with your underpainting, or you can be quite tight. If you're quite loose, it means you've got to do a little bit more work when you do your dry detail layers. If you don't put in quite enough contrast in those base layers, you've just got to take longer to do them with your dry layers. With using this paper, you've got less chances to do it, so I'm working much more precisely, much more carefully. And plus, again, it's less is more. This whole piece is about being dramatic and creating something dramatic. And if you've seen the finished image, even though the scan is quite harsh compared to what it is actually looking like in reality, it just pops. And that's what you're looking for, dramatic effect. So the less pencils that you use, the better. So you see here, I've used my sky blue. I'm scumbling here, so I'm doing tiny, small, round, circular motion with the pencil, medium pressure, and when you're scumbling, you do little small, tiny circles, keeping your pencil on the surface, nice, tight little circles, just building up the pigment in that area. I'll do a close-up of me doing some of the different pencil strokes with their correct technical terminology in another hints and tips video as well. I'm writing a little list as I go of videos that I think will help just to explain some things, like with the pressure test. I'll redo that one for, say, the Colourfix Smooth and a couple of other different papers. So here again you can see just how much adding that light flesh and the sky blue really shows that light hitting that top ear. And again with this, I played with the reference photo a little bit. I happened to take the photo, it caught all the colours in the cat's fur anyway, so I didn't enhance it very much. I put it through the Be Funky program, the editor that I've shown you before, and all I did was just up the contrast a tiny bit and also beautify it a tiny bit, which enhanced the colours a little bit more. And if you look at the reference photo and then you look at the pencil selection that I've made, you should hopefully, even if you don't see it at the beginning, you should, as you start working, begin to see those colours popping out of the fur. You should see the pinks, the mauves, the purples, the blues, and the black really just creates the shadow. So when people say about selecting the right colours, again, this is just my translation of the colours that I see. If you see different colours in there, you don't have to stick to the ones that I've used. Use the ones that you can see. There's no right or wrong, remember. So here I've gone in now with my white over the top of areas that I really want to enhance. So remember, we've got a base of that helio blue reddish in there, a touch of the Venetian red, and then we've had light flesh, sky blue, and now some white. And you can use your finger or a blending tool as well, just over the top, just to smooth it all together if you want to, just to soften it. Or you can just use your pencil. Again, see, I'm just keeping that pencil on the surface, using little movements side to side, little circles as well in there, little ovals. Just building and pushing a little bit harder in the areas that I want it to be a little bit more intense. Just going in there now with one of the warm greys, the warm grey 2. So again, with this cat, you've got some warm areas and some cool areas. So the white and the sky blue are going to take care of the cool areas, and then your warm grey 2 and 3 and your light flesh will help take care of the warm areas of the fur. And you see there as well where I've taken it too light. That is intentional, because you need to then go back in over the top with your blues and your mid-tones, and also with your black if you need to take some of it back into complete darkness again. That's the lovely thing about working on this black paper. So you don't have to be super precise. It doesn't matter if you go a tiny bit wrong, if you go a tiny bit over your lines, you can correct it. And because of the light, this ear gets worked quite a lot, and also then it'll be the fur behind the right ear and over the haunches that will get that. I remember that got worked so much, building the layers just to create bright contrast and light and softness of fur as well. Many layers will come in that fur, but as I say, at the moment we're just going to concentrate on bringing this down over the face. Really light touch I'm using here. You'll also notice this as well, the under part of that ear in the photo obviously is a black line, so you need to put a hint of it in there, because obviously you can't leave it that you haven't got any line there at all. But if you've noticed there, I've just used the Venetian red, and then I've a little bit of highlight just to mark in that outer edge of the ear, and then I've gone over it with the black just to knock it back a tiny bit, so it's just left with a small hint of that line, so it's not too harsh. Same here, I'm just taking the black up over any area that's, if there's too much highlight in the lines, you can just go back in with that black. So again, the sky blue now, just marking in some of that real light where the light's hitting the fur down over the top of the head. And even though I'm marking in these in the direction of fur, it's going on there quite rough. So again, I'll go over it with the black, I'll probably go over it with the grey, we'll go back in with that helio blue that we started off with as well, just to keep smoothing it. So that's the mauve as well now, the mauve, purple. And again, it's just really, really, really light touches. I can't emphasize how light a touch you need onto this paper. So again, it's a little bit like when we work with the Albrecht-Dürers and we're not looking at the texture, we're looking at the undertones. Here we've got this beautiful Venetian red and the pinks inside of the ear, down over the outside of the ear as well. And again, it's just, see, I'm just light placing, just touches. And it's all about keeping your eye on that reference photo. And keeping your pencils sharp, if you notice. My pencils are super sharp. I could do with a nice little assistant keeping them sharp for me, to save me having to keep stopping. Just softening that top edge there using the warm grey. So I see the question asked quite a lot, sort of, what do you use to blend? What do you use to blend? It's like, just let the pencils blend. If you use fine enough layers and you're thinking ahead of, oh, which colour do I need to put underneath? So you tend to put your dark or your mid colours, your bright colours underneath. And then you soften them back by using your greys and your light flesh and your sky blue over the top. And then you can knock them back again with the dark. And it is just thinking in your head of what do I need to mix on top of that pencil next, or what do I need to put down under that pencil, that when I layer I get a blend of all of them. So you don't necessarily need a blending tool, you don't need to use OMS. Obviously with the watercolour pencils you do need some water just to dissolve that wax binder. Again, using those dry, you just use the pencil layers to blend with the layer below. Quite a few of my artist friends, like I know Alan Willett, he only uses his pencils to blend, and it is a case of just building all of those light pressure layers. So here I've got the Caput Mortem Violet now. I'm just marking in some of those dark tones. But I've popped the lights in first of all to really make the edges of that ear pop. Popping in the mid-tones with the Venetian red, and now I'm going in with the Caput Mortem Violet and the dark indigo. And then we'll use the black later on as well, to anywhere that we've lost the areas, the lines that are completely black, we'll just use the black pencil just to bring them back again. It's quite nice, this one as well, because we're using quite a limited palette. We're not using that many colours. We're using, I don't know, whites, 2 light greys, light flesh and a light sky blue. So that's 5 lights. We've got our black, Caput Mortem Violet and our dark indigo for our darks. And our mid-tones, you've got our mauve, Venetian red, burnt carmine, the helio blue reddish, and the Indanthrene blue. You can skip one of those blues, you only need to use one or the other. I'd go for the helio blue reddish if you've got it, but either will work. So it's quite a limited palette range really, which is quite nice. Here you see what I was saying about once you've got all your lights and your colours in place, you go back in with your dark indigo and then your black in extreme places, just to put in the details, really. By using the black as a negative, drawing back in the shadows and the dark lines, it makes, you can see that the texture of all the lights and the midtones really coming through. It'll show more on the scan. Obviously, like I said, you know, this is quite light because of the light, my actual work light reflecting. I use two really strong daylight strip lamps directly over my my drawing board, clamps to my drawing board. We'll get a little bit looser once we work down over this next area with this light flesh, and what I'll do is I'll put to use the those indentation marks I made with the stylus when I transferred the line drawing over. So I'm literally just feeling my way down. I'm using my reference as a guide to where the lines are, but I know that in here there are some indentation lines. And you can see there where there's one quite clearly there over the top of the brow, at the bottom, that light fleshy area, and you should start seeing them come through now. So there you can see I've covered that area with the light flesh. You can see those indentation lines there, and that is pretty much part of my line drawing, where I've marked out those areas using that stylus. And again, like I mentioned up on the ear, it doesn't matter here that I'm covering quite a lot of the area with this light flesh. We'll be going back in with our colours and then with our black pencil at the end to bring back all of those dark lines. So it doesn't matter that you've got too much of the light flesh going down on here. We'll use this method as well up over the back, but we'll be doing that with the sky blue mainly to start with as well, and you'll see then when I do that how rough the texture is of the fur of the paper. You should be able to see it here a little bit down on that bottom area where I've just used that light flesh, but you'll see it more so when we lay the light sky blue down over the back of the cat later on in the next video. Okay, so I've gone in first of all with that light flesh, and I've used the side of the nib just to feel my way around and lightly rub it over that area to leave a base layer of pigment. Because remember, we need a decent base of pigment on here to build up a few layers before we lose that roughness of the tooth and make it nice and smooth. Otherwise our lines are just really grainy. I'm using a little bit more pressure now. I'll be going in, getting all my highlights in there, and we'll go in with our midtones, our colours, and then we'll go in with our darks just to bring back all of the detail, and probably pop a little bit more of our highlights in again as well. It's a very simple process, to be honest. It gives a great dramatic effect, although saying that, this cat, I think pure drawing time, so that missing out obviously taking the photo, playing around with the photo, printing out, transferring the line drawing, stopping to sharpen all my pencils. Actual sat at the table drawing time, this was about 13.5 hours start to finish. That is actually quite a lot more than, say, and it's 12 by 16 inch, the finished piece. So that is actually a lot more than I might put in to a 12 by 16 full colour portrait, head and shoulders of a dog or a cat, using a watercolour paint still underlayer and then the many layers of dry pencil over the top. I don't understand quite why. I think this one just took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to, because I think I know when I got to the fur on the back, it did take so many more layers than I expected it to, just to create the real softness that's needed. See here, I'm actually pressing quite hard there. I'm just playing with that area there because I want to see later on how bright highlight I need to get behind that ear. I needed something in place just to make that ear pop forwards there. So again, we've gone in with our light flesh, we've gone in with a touch of the whites, we're now going in with our sky blue, getting all those highlights in place. And then we'll be going in with the Venetian red and the burnt carmine at some point, probably the blues, the indigos, the violet, and then the black. I think the other thing with this, why it might have taken me longer, was it made me think a lot more. Working on black, you do need to change your way of thinking. Just don't think about how you normally create. You need to approach this with a clear mind, really, that okay, I'm doing this, I'm just gonna not think about it, I'm just gonna go with it. Throw all the other rules out of the window, apart from obviously how you can blend pencil and layer pencil. But your workings, like say in negatives, you're kind of working in reverse to how you normally would work. So you're not putting in your shadows really, you're putting in all your highlights. I'm just speeding this up a tiny bit here, so you get the principle of what it is I'm doing. Again, we're just still building all the highlight areas. This like second layer of light flesh that's going over the first, I'm using more of the tip now rather than the side of the nib. I'm using a tiny bit more pressure, and what I'm trying to do is just build enough pigment into the tooth just to soften it a little bit. Once I've got that, then I can go in, like I say, with this Venetian red, and then the darks, because it's smooth there now, so I can actually use the pencils smoothly rather than them going on there really roughly. So just look at your lights as really creating a nice little base layer for you to build onto. I do remember actually when I was creating the ear, I got lost a few times in all of those little lines and colours and marks, but the final result was so worth the perseverance. Like I say, just ignore the fact that this is a cat that you're drawing at this point. Just look at the shapes, the colours, the lines and the proportions and the direction the lines are going in relation to other parts of the ear. Lay your pencil down along the lines to make sure you've got them going in the right directions, and then when you step back and look at it as a whole, it's like, wow, that ear looks pretty good. I've actually got this one sat, this finished portrait sat on my in my living room on my above the fireplace at the moment. I just brought it down for a few days just to look at it, and each time I go past it, it's very rare that I'm impressed or happy with any of my drawings, but with this one I am actually really liking it. I think I've done some pieces, obviously lots of pieces of just white on black. The polar bear was a mix of greys and white on black, and it was the first time using this Colourfix Smooth. And I've done some where I've just injected a tiny bit of colour onto the black paper with the white. I'm guessing this is the first time I've actually used colours on the black paper, so in a way it is quite new to me, so the results are quite new to me, and they're also quite exciting. I think that's what it is. After doing this, it's opened my mind to the possibilities of what else I could create using this technique on the black paper. So you see here, as I'm working my way down, I've got those lights in. Up around the top area, we've went through our mids of putting in a Venetian red, a little bit of burnt carmine. Then we've gone in with our dark indigo and the black here, just to define those detail lines again. See, we knocked back most of the highlight that was there, and just leaving tiny bits of it showing through. Now, if we went in with sharp pencils and just tried to put in those tiny little highlight lines, they would go on too rough. And then to try and build up a few layers of them would mean they would come out too bright, or they would just simply overflow onto the line, you know, either side of the line, and not be precise enough. So doing it this way in reverse, so putting down a light layer of your highlights and then using your black to take it all back, and your black puts back in the detail around, in negative form, around those highlight lines. It just creates a really simple but effective way of doing it. So when working this area, just keep looking at your reference photo, because I do remember I did get quite lost in all of these little details and lines that are in there. So that's the dark indigo's gone in there now as well. A little bit more of the light flash, taking it down now over the top of this brow. You should see some more of those dark impression lines coming through. See, I've got a little bit more brave now, so I was quite hesitant to start with. Now it's like, no, I'm quite happy with how this is working. Let's just go in there with the side of that pencil, get those highlights down, and I know now my method is working. So you might find yourself like this, a little bit hesitant to start with, and then once you understand how the pencils are working and in what order on this paper, you'll get quite brave, and you'll speed up as you go along. As your confidence builds, really. Okay, so I've got that first layer in there. Remember, on the side of the nib, just to get placement. You can see some of those black indentation lines. That's all I've got. A few little lines in, little marks to show direction, little points of the fur. Now I've gone back in with the light flesh, using the point and being a bit more precise, a little bit more pressure. That's our blue that we started off with, because I had no blue. I just marked in some of the area up over the nose and the ear. There was no blue actually marked out up over this brow under the ear. again, pop your highlights in, then your midtones, which are your Venetian reds and your blues, and then you'll go in and pop your darks in, which is again here, your dark indigo, you could put molten violet and your black at the end. And if you want to go in with your white, just if there's any areas that or your lightest of grey, just to pop in any super highlights. You see here it's pretty much knocked all of that light flesh back there now. Just a few tiny little bits showing through. Just softening it. Building the pigment, smoothing out the actual surface, the tooth. So when you do go back in with your black, you must make sure that it is super sharp here. The last layer that goes in, you want super sharp light flesh for marking your highlights, and super sharp pencils all the way through, to be honest. Just make sure that when you're putting down that first base layer of your light flesh, as we used over on this cheek, it's not a cheek really, the above the brow, just use the side of it, don't go in to put the first layer down using the point. You want to use the side of the nib just to smooth some pigment over that area. So see here, super sharp black pencil, we're going in now and marking in all of those details. Really is starting to bring some life detail to that ear. And again, with all of this area, we're working at a sort of like 90% completion, possibly 95. I always leave a certain allowance that once the rest of the portrait is done, then we can balance it all over by working top to bottom if we need to. So little touches now of the light sky blue. A little bit more of the Venetian red, or the burnt carmine. And it's just touches. But you wouldn't believe, like I say, how much a little touch of that pencil on this black surface really, really zings. Okay, so just bringing down over the nose. We're going to work the nose and just up towards underneath that eye as well in this part of the video. There's the warm grade 2 there, just popping in a few little highlights as I see them. Knocking them back a tiny bit to create more detail using the sharp black. Is where we did all those little light placements to start with, where we sort of dotted in the outline using that blue to start with. We just build on it. It's almost like as we build confidence, we build the cat. Each layer just becomes slightly stronger than the previous layer. Again here I know that I can put in all of this light blue. Again down over the edge of that other brow, you need to get it in there, even though it's like obviously a black outline on the cat in the photo. Artistic impression, artistic license, we need to make sure we've got a hint of that line coming through. So use your light sky blue down over that edge, then you can knock it back just so there's only a hint of it later on. So just going back through here now with the Kaput Molten Violet. Tiny touch of that mauve. It's all little touches. Here you go, what I was saying about once you've got a hint of an outline down over that top left brow, you can knock it back. So I'm using the dark indigo to knock it back quite a bit there. Just softening that line you see on that edge. Knock it back even more by using the black now. And we'll pop the long brow hairs, whiskers, the eye whiskers. I'm not sure what they're called officially. The eye whiskers over the top of the brow, that they'll go in later on, so they'll show where the edge of that eye brow is as well on the cat. Okay, again here you can see I've gone in with my dark, my black, knocked back some of those initial tones of the sky blue that were down there. Then we've gone in with our whites and just highlighted our light grey and really highlighted it, and now I'm going in with the mauve and the blue just to knock it all back again. And it is literally, this is just building the layers to smooth that area out again, because we need some smooth fluffy fur texture there. We don't want this rough texture grain of the paper coming through. Now we can go back in with our initial sky blue that we were using. This time it's going on a lot softer. See, each time we go in there, it just smooths it a tiny bit more. Now it's like graduating out from that pool of darkness above that eyebrow. I guess this is like working in reverse, as if you were doing a white cat on white paper, doing a black cat on black paper. Maybe if you were doing a white cat on white paper, that had enough grit. Maybe I'll try this method. Maybe I'll get some white Colourfix Smooth and see if the theory works, that you can just go and put in your lights, your mid-tones, and then pull it back by popping your whites in over the areas that you want to keep white. It might work. Might end up with just a real blended mess of white mixing with the pencils underneath. Maybe it won't work quite as well as effectively as the black. So here we've worked that area with the soft fur, literally exactly the same principles we had on that brow where we used the light flesh, except here now we've just come down over it with the sky blue, because there's a much more bluey tone of the light on that nose. Exactly the same way again, we're just marking in the little shapes, placement lines. There are some small indentation marks down here that you should be able to see, so if you use your pencil on the side of the nib, you should be able to see those lines just coming through. And just use those as your guidelines. again, we're going to take it all up to light, and then we can knock it all back again. But remember, we can't put in our midtones and our darks until we've got those lovely lights in there. Hopefully you're understanding the process now, the method, and literally we're going to just use that over the rest of the cat. Obviously we need to create a different type of fur once we get to the back and the haunches, and then again it's slightly different again as we come around underneath onto the chest of the cat as well. So you can see there, that's taken that nose way too light, but we need those lights there. Exactly like I say when with the working in reverse, we need those darks there for the lights to show up over the top. With this we need the lights there for our midtones and our darks to show up over the top of. So the same principle, just the opposite. Okay, so we've got our lights in place. We're going in now with one of our blues, either the Indantha if you're using that one, or the Helio Blue Reddish. Taking out some of that sky blue and the white that's in there. You can instantly see now, just by adding this blue in, that's softening it down, bringing it almost in line with the work that we've already done on top of the head and around that brow. It isn't just about, let's say, following what's in your reference, it's keeping it balanced with the work that you've already done on the rest of the picture. So okay, so we've got our midtones in now, which was that colour. We can now go in with our dark indigo. So remember, our darks are our dark indigo, our caput mortem violet, and of course our black. Okay, and then we're going in with the caput mortem violet, which was our other dark, remember? Tiny light little placement of the colour. You can see just how effective those tiny little marks are. I'm still moving quite quickly, quite loosely here as well. It just helps, I think, give that overall impression of a lovely sketchiness to the cat as well. Even though it's quite precision in there, it is a lovely loose and sketchy feel to it as well. Okay, so we're coming close to the end of this second video of the cat tutorial. In the next one we will be starting on the fur, like I say, up behind the head. We'll be putting down a lovely base layer where you'll see the roughness of that paper really showing through. We'll see how to work all that fluffy fur texture on the haunches. I've got a feeling there might be a third video, so I'm not sure I can edit it all down into just 2 videos. This is 3 hours down into 1. You can see here now, like I say, hopefully it's so you've got the principle that we're putting down a light layer, then our colours, rotating and just building them up a couple of times, repeating the method. Then we go in with a very sharp black pencil to put in back in our details at the end, and any highlights, super highlights, we can pop back in with our white or our lights, which are our light flesh and our sky blue. So hopefully that has made sense for this first part of working on the fur, and obviously the texture of those ears. You see they're just popping in that little black down the side of the nose, how much that has brought that nose forward and sunk the shape back. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this second part of the cat tutorial, and please do join me for the third part. Okay, thank you very much for watching.